All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a truly fascinating, deeply forensic look at one of the most infamous days in human history, Sunday, April 14th, 1912. We're going to break down the final 16 hours of the RMS Titanic. You know, we so often think of the Titanic story as just the sinking itself, right? But when we actually analyze the specific documented events of that Sunday, a completely different, incredibly dramatic countdown emerges. So, let's dive into this and see exactly how a routine day at sea transformed into absolute tragedy.
I want you to anchor yourself in this exact moment. It's the morning of April 14th, Titanic's third full day out on the North Atlantic. The mighty liner is absolutely teeming with life. Now, the day actually dawned bright and sunny, but there was strong northwest winds blowing at about 20 knots. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates how early decisions shaped the entire day. Because of those 20-knot winds, the scheduled Sunday morning lifeboat drill, it was completely canceled. So instead of practicing emergency procedures, passengers were just enjoying a really pleasant, fairly breezy Sunday at sea.
It's kind of crazy how a simple morning swim completely rewrites a popular modern myth. We have this account from first-class passenger Colonel Archibald Gracie. He recalled enjoying his swim in a tank heated to a, quote, refreshing temperature. Now, why does this matter to us? Well, there's this really persistent myth that Titanic was essentially a seagoing towering inferno, suffering from a massive, out-of-control coal bunker fire that was structurally weakening the ship. But the actual documented location of that coal bunker was directly beneath this swimming bath. If there was a raging fire down there, that water would have been scalding hot, not refreshing. In reality, that fire had been successfully extinguished the day before.
So while the passengers were relaxing, the wireless room was already receiving some critical data. At 9:12 a.m., the liner Coronia sent a warning about bergs, field ice, and growlers, which, by the way, are smaller, really low-lying pieces of ice. This message included the absolutely crucial MSG prefix. That's a Master's Service message, indicating incredibly important navigational info. Captain Smith received it and actually replied by 10:28 a.m. Yet, in this wild contrast to those ominous warnings, Captain Smith casually spent his morning personally conducting the Sunday church service in the first-class dining saloon, leading hymns like "O God, Our Help in Ages Past." The warnings were definitely there, but the ship's routine, completely uninterrupted.
By noon, the officers calculated the ship's daily run. They had covered 546 nautical miles since the previous day. I mean, that is an impressive average speed of 22.06 knots. Because they were making such incredible time, these really confident whispers started rippling through the ship. The overarching sentiment among the passengers was that Titanic would actually arrive at White Star's Pier 59 in New York on Tuesday evening, way ahead of her scheduled Wednesday morning arrival. The sheer optimism and really the arrogance of early 20th century engineering were in full swing here.
But while the ship was just speeding along, there were some subtle physical clues hinting at what the crew had been dealing with below decks. Over lunch, Assistant Purser Reginald Barker and his table companions noticed a very slight 2-degree list to the port side. Barker made an incredibly educated guess. He figured the coal supply had been used up faster on the starboard side, and you know what? He was spot on. Remember that extinguished coal fire we just talked about? To put it out, the crew literally had to empty the starboard bunker in boiler room number 5. It's a fascinating forensic detail that beautifully connects the hidden internal workings of the ship to the everyday passenger experience. As the afternoon progressed, the atmosphere outside shifted dramatically. The peak afternoon temperature hit just 48 degrees Fahrenheit, about 8.8 degrees Celsius, and it was dropping fast. The high winds made the decks so incredibly breezy that passengers were basically driven inside. But what they found inside was pretty surprising. The ship's heating systems were completely failing to keep up with the bitter cold, so you have passengers sitting around these lavish public rooms, wrapped up in thick winter coats and furs, openly complaining and wondering why the ultimate luxury liner wasn't, more comfortably heated. Now, this severe drop in temperature was a physical indicator of exactly what the wireless operators were hearing. At 1:54 p.m., the White Star liner Baltic sent another master service message reporting icebergs and large quantities of field ice. Captain Smith was directly handed this message, but look at this contrast, it's wild. Smith later handed this dire warning to White Star Line chairman Bruce Ismay as they crossed paths on deck. And Ismay? He just casually pocketed the critical message and headed down to lunch. It is a stunning display of hubris, treating a massive navigational threat as just a mere curiosity.
Later that afternoon, right around 5:50 p.m., Titanic executed a maneuver known as turning the corner. This is just the scheduled course change to line the ship up with the entrance to New York Harbor. And I really want to pause here to debunk another persistent myth. For years, people have claimed Titanic deliberately delayed this turn by a full hour to steam further south and avoid the ice. Actually, scratch that. It is entirely false. The wreck position and the known coordinates absolutely prove she made this turn right on schedule, within 3 miles of the planned location. They didn't alter their grand route for the ice at all.
Okay, so at 6:52 p.m., the sun set ahead of Titanic's bow. And this brings us to one of the most fatal environmental shifts of the entire night. That stiff breeze that had been blowing all day, it completely died. In its place, this rare, absolute stillness set in. As observers later described it, the sea was like a mill pond. This glassy, highly unusual calm on the North Atlantic meant there were absolutely no waves. And, as we'll see shortly, a perfectly flat ocean makes spotting a dark iceberg at night nearly impossible.
Let's just look at the sheer volume of data coming into that Marconi room. By the time evening fell, a literal mounting of warnings had piled up. Caroni in the morning, America, Baltic, and then at 7:37 p.m., the Californian reporting 3 large bergs just 5 miles to the south. The dramatic irony here is just staggering. We know exactly what the crew knew. The wireless operators were getting flooded with the precise locations of ice, yet the operational behavior of the ship did not reflect the severity of this incoming data in the slightest.
In fact, Titanic's behavior was the exact opposite of caution. Around 7 p.m., the final 3 primary boilers were connected to the engines. Passengers actually noticed the engine vibrations increasing. The ship's RPMs were being pushed up for a high-speed run. Meanwhile, the social atmosphere on board was electric. The Widener family was hosting a dinner in Captain Smith's honor. The 5-man quintet was playing lively tunes like Tales of Hoffman, and down in second class, passengers were enjoying a really upbeat hymn sing-song. Ultimate luxury and joy, literally accelerating into the dark.
Fast forward to 8 p.m., and the physical environment had become absolutely brutal. Quartermaster Hitchens came on duty and checked the bridge thermometer. It had plummeted to 31.5 degrees Fahrenheit, just below freezing. They were now officially steaming through an Arctic high-pressure system. It was a crystal clear, moonless night, and the air out there was absolutely biting.
And this brings us to a really haunting conversation at 8:55 p.m. between Captain Smith and Second Officer Lightoller. They stood out on the open bridge discussing the bitter cold and that perfectly flat calm. Lightoller remarked that it was actually a pity the wind had died, because without waves there would be no dog's bone of foam. That's the visible whitewater that crashes against the base of a berg. Without that white contrast against the black rock and the black water, an iceberg becomes a virtual ghost in the dark. They explicitly knew the danger the calm sea presented, and yet they maintained their incredible speed.
At 9:52 p.m., a tragic logistical failure basically sealed their fate. The wireless room received a message from the ship Mesaba reporting much heavy pack ice and a great number of large icebergs directly in Titanic's path. But here is the critical flaw. It lacked the official MSG Master Service prefix, and it wasn't addressed to Captain Smith personally. Jack Phillips, the wireless operator, was exhausted and heavily backlogged with sending passenger messages to Cape Race. Because it lacked that vital prefix, Phillips acknowledged it, but he never took it to the bridge.
Exactly at 10 p.m., the watch changes. First Officer Murdoch relieves Lightoller. Deep inside the ship, the lights in the second and third class public rooms are extinguished, bringing the evening parties to a close as passengers start drifting off to sleep. And out on the stern docking bridge, Quartermaster George Rowe takes a reading from the trailing cherub log. This is a mechanical device towed behind the ship, and he uses it to measure the ultimate doomed variable of the night.
That reading revealed a shocking number, 22.5. Despite the freezing temperatures, despite the flat calm water that hid that crucial dog's bone of foam, and despite a relentless barrage of ice warnings throughout the entire day, Titanic was actually accelerating. She was tearing through the pitch-black water at an astonishing 22.5 knots.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly chilling thought as we wrap up this explainer. The stage was flawlessly, tragically set. No wind, no moon, ignored warnings, and maximum speed. I'll leave you to ponder this. What happens when ultimate luxury and blind arrogance accelerate at 22.5 knots into a freezing, invisible trap? The answer, as history violently recorded just a couple of hours later, would change the world forever. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack the final 16 hours of the Titanic. Keep questioning the details, and I'll see you next time.